All right, video number 2 of Cyril telling you how to do taxes. Right now we're going to complete a 1040 tax return for John Doe. A couple things just to make reference to is John Doe's filing status. He is single and claims only himself. Obviously the $70,000, which is his income, will be important, as well as the federal income tax withheld. So let's get started. To start, you'll need the 1040 tax form. This is found online, or in the example that you're about to go through, it's been provided to you. Use the blue form that's been provided to you to complete the 1040 easy. To start, we'll look at some basic information. On the front side of the form, you'll notice that it starts out with filing status. Single, married, filing jointly, married, filing separately, head of household, qualifying widower. If we refer back to John Doe's status, John Doe is single and claims only himself. So as we come back to the form, which you'll just handwrite, we're going to check the box single. We're going to fill out the information for John Doe. So first name John, last name Doe, Social Security. We can just make up 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 5, 9. Just make up a Social Security number. Next thing that we'll look at is it says your standard deduction. Someone can claim you as a dependent, or you were born before January 2nd, 1954, which would relate to Medicare, that we don't have to worry about in this case, or we are blind, which we don't have to worry about either. If someone can claim you, then we'd have to check that box, but if we refer back to John claims only himself, and it would make mention that he is a dependent if that were true. So let's go back to the 1040 form. Next, we can just make up an address, or actually, that address was given. So John lives 2400 Lindbergh Drive, Minnetonka, Minnesota, 55305, which is the school's address. So we could take time and fill that out, but for the main point of the front side, we only have to worry about filling out personal information, which you would be able to figure out if this were you. So let's quickly flip this over and focus on how we actually get the numbers. To start, it says wages, salaries, tips from our W-2 form. So we'll go back to our W-2 form and we'll look that we have in box 1, $70,000. So let's write down 70,000 in box 1. Boxes 2B through 5B all deal with various forms that would have been sent to us. So let's just take a quick look. The first one mentions tax-exempt interest or taxable interest. This would come from a 1099 form, or a 1099 INT form, which is interest income from our bank statement. If we don't have this form, we don't have to worry about it. And in this case, we don't have that form, so we're going to put a 0. The next thing that it mentions is qualified dividends or ordinary dividends. This would come from our investments, which again, this would be sent to us in a form. We don't have that, so we'll put a 0. The next part also looks at some investment options, which are IRAs, pensions, annuities, and we don't have any of those forms. Now, I know that in an article that you read, that a 401k is a great way to lower your taxable income or adjust down your income. Now, that's not going to be mentioned here because it would be reflected on your W-2. So let's keep moving. Next up is Social Security benefits, which again, we don't have to worry about because unless we're we're over or at age 62, we're not taking any of those benefits. So in this case, again, we're going to place a 0. Once we get down to line 6, it says total income. Add lines 1 through 5 and add any amounts from Schedule 1, line 22. Schedule 1 I showed in the first video, which kind of allowed us to adjust our income if we had any deductions or additional incomes. If we went back to that form and looked on line 22, we would carry forward any of those items. However, we don't currently have those, so we can just add up lines 1 through 5, which is going to be $70,000. On line 7, it says our adjusted gross income. If you have no adjustments to income, enter the amount from line 6. Otherwise, subtract Schedule 1, line 36, from line 6. Again, we'd go back if we had any of those things that we are adjusting down our income and subtract line 36 from line 6. In this case, we made no adjustments. So literally, we're just going to enter the amount from line 6, $70,000 again. Next up on line 8 is our standard deduction or itemized deductions. Earlier you learned about these options. However, what you're trying to figure out is if I itemize my deductions, and in John's case, he's single, would they add up over $12,000? If not, we're going to take the greater amount, which in this case, since we had no adjustments, we're going to take our standard deduction of $12,000. Also important to point out that on this particular line, say that we are claimed by our parents, which many of us are at this point, we would need to fill out an additional worksheet. That additional worksheet would be our dependent worksheet. So again, if your parents claim you or anybody else can claim you as a dependent, we have to go fill out this worksheet. That again can be found on our IRS site, which I'll talk about shortly. Let's keep moving forward. On line 9, it says qualified business income deduction. If we don't have a business, we don't need to worry about this. We move on to line number 10. Line number 10 says taxable income. Subtract lines 8 and 9 from line 7. So if we look at 8 and 9, those add up to 12,000, and we need to subtract that from line 7 of 70,000. When we do that, we get 58,000. 58,000 becomes the income that we are actually taxed on, and that's why it's called taxable income. So let's keep moving forward. On line 11, it says A tax, and it gives you a bunch of different boxes in different forms. To make this quick and easy, what we need to do, and what line 11 is actually asking, is for us to go find this 58,000 in the tax tables. So at this point, you're going to have to go out to the irs.gov site, which will look like this when you get there. And the easiest way to find the tax tables to look up that 58,000 to figure out how much we actually owe in taxes, let's just do a quick search. And I'm just going to type in tax tables. And then basically the first link is what I'll have you click on. It's going to bring up a PDF file, which is quite lengthy, 25 pages. But what you can quickly do is scan, and again, what we're looking for is the 58,000. So it bolds these numbers and makes them slightly bigger so we can easily scan and find 58,000. So we're getting close. Oops, went a little far. So I find 58,000, and I'm just going to zoom in so you can see what we need to look at. We found the 58,000 down here. The next thing we need to figure out is our taxable income at least but less than whatever number is on line 10. The next part we need to consider is what column that we're going to, once we find that number, return the secondary number from. So in this case, John made exactly $58,000, which we find here, but less than $58,050. John is also single, as mentioned in his W-2 form, so the number that we need to return to line 11 of our tax return form is this $8,705. So let's go back to our 1040, and we are going to put in $8,705. The next thing that we see is line 12, which mentions a child tax credit. That's right. Most of us are worth $2,000 to our parents. Now, there are some requirements that need to be met, but basically every child is worth $2,000, which we can subtract off of our taxable number, which is this our tax liability of $8,705. However, John does not have any kids, so he's going to have a 0 in that. Next up, it says subtract line 12 from 11. If 0 or less, enter 0. However, we subtract that, we get $8,705 again, and then we move on to line 14, which is other taxes, Schedule 4. We don't have to worry